There's a strange beauty in the way truth operates. It doesn't care for your comfort or your carefully constructed worldview. Instead, it's relentless, like a river carving its way through stone. Some truths are so unnerving, they hit you like a gut punch, leaving you reeling, questioning everything. But those are often the truths that set you free, after they've pissed you off. Carl Jung, one of the most profound thinkers of the 20th century, had a knack for delivering these kinds of truths. Today, I'm sharing 3 of his quotes that, at first, felt like a slap in the face, but eventually became guiding lights in my life. The first helped me understand, the second helped me see, and the third helped me act. Each one was like a psychological colonoscopy, uncomfortable, invasive, but ultimately illuminating. The first quote, "What you resist, persists." This one feels almost cruel in its simplicity. When I first encountered it, I was going through a phase where I thought I could outrun my problems. I believed that if I ignored certain feelings or situations long enough, they'd disappear. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Jung's words hit me like a ton of bricks because they exposed a pattern I was desperately trying to avoid. The more I resisted certain emotions, fear, anger, sadness, the more they seemed to tighten their grip on me. Imagine trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can keep it submerged for a while, but the effort is exhausting, and eventually, it will shoot up, often in unpredictable and explosive ways. This is exactly what happens when we suppress our emotions. They don't vanish, they just build pressure beneath the surface. And when they finally surface, it's rarely in a way that's convenient or controlled. Jung wasn't just making an observation, he was offering a roadmap. He showed me that the antidote to resistance is acceptance. The moment I began to accept my emotions, instead of resisting them, something incredible happened. They started to lose their power over me. Acceptance doesn't mean you have to like or agree with what's happening. It simply means you stop fighting reality. When you lean into the discomfort rather than running from it, the energy shifts. What once felt like a looming storm transforms into a passing cloud. Jung expanded on this by saying, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." And he was right. The things we resist don't just stick around. They magnify, demanding to be acknowledged. Resistance is like feeding a fire with the very fuel it needs to survive. Every time you push away an emotion or deny a truth, it gains momentum. Acceptance, on the other hand, allows these things to dissolve, integrate, and ultimately transform into wisdom. For me, this realization came during a particularly dark time in my life. I was battling deep feelings of inadequacy, but instead of confronting them, I buried them under layers of work and distractions. I thought I was coping. In reality, I was fueling the fire. It wasn't until I sat with these uncomfortable feelings, allowed them to be, and examined where they were coming from that I began to heal. What I discovered was that these feelings weren't there to destroy me. They were signals, guiding me toward deeper self-understanding. The second quote, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." This one initially felt strange, almost mystical. I resisted it because it suggested that every person I encountered, every experience I had, was somehow a reflection of myself. I thought, how could that be? Surely other people's behavior is their own, not mine. But the more I reflected on this idea, the more it began to resonate. Life, it turns out, is a mirror. Every interaction, every relationship holds up a reflection of some part of you, sometimes a part you'd rather not see. Think about the people who irritate you the most. Maybe it's their arrogance, their stubbornness, or their neediness. Now, consider this. What if those qualities exist in you, in some form? That's the discomfort Jung was pointing at. When we encounter these reflections, it's an opportunity to learn, to grow. The universe has a way of placing us in situations and relationships that challenge us to confront the parts of ourselves we've been avoiding. Let's take an everyday example. Suppose you have a colleague who constantly seeks validation, and it drives you crazy. Instead of dismissing them as annoying, ask yourself, why does this bother me so much? Is there a part of me that craves validation too? Often, the traits that irritate us in others are the very ones we haven't fully acknowledged or accepted in ourselves. This realization can be humbling, but it's also empowering. It shifts the focus from blaming others to understanding yourself. Jung once said, "Life does not come from events, but from us. Everything that happens outside has already been. This means that our outer world is a projection of our inner state. When you meet someone who seems to test your patience or trigger your insecurities, it's not just about them, it's about you. They're holding up a mirror, inviting you to look deeper. This understanding changed the way I approached conflicts and challenges. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" I started asking, "What is this trying to teach me about myself?" This perspective transformed my relationships. It helped me see that even the most challenging people in my life were, in a sense, my teachers. They were showing me aspects of myself that I needed to confront. Sometimes the lessons were painful. Other times they were beautiful. But in every case, they led to growth. The third quote: "Whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event." This one was perhaps the most jarring. Jung suggests that the parts of ourselves we reject or suppress don't simply disappear. They manifest externally, often as events or experiences that force us to confront what we've tried to bury. At first, this felt like a personal attack. The idea that I could be responsible for some of the chaos in my life was hard to swallow. But Jung was onto something profound. Take anxiety, for example. For years, I tried to suppress my anxiety. I thought if I ignored it long enough, it would go away. But life had other plans. The more I tried to hide it, the more it seemed to pop up in the form of external events, stressful situations, difficult relationships, even random encounters that would trigger my anxiety. It was as if the universe was conspiring to make me face what I was desperately trying to avoid. Jung put it another way: if you reject a part of you, you expel it from your psyche and place it on the external world, so it is now an external event. This wasn't easy to hear, but it was exactly what I needed. It forced me to stop playing the victim and start taking responsibility for my internal state. I realized that the external events weren't punishments, they were lessons designed to bring me back to myself. This quote also connects to another of Jung's insights. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When you find yourself constantly annoyed or triggered by certain people or situations, it's worth asking, what part of me am I rejecting? This perspective can be liberating. Instead of feeling like life is happening to you, you start to see that life is happening for you. Every challenge, every setback is an invitation to heal and integrate a part of yourself. In my case, it wasn't until I began to work with my anxiety holistically, through mindfulness, dietary changes, and even psychedelic therapy, that I started to see real transformation. The journey wasn't easy, but it was worth it. By facing what I had long rejected, I was able to reclaim parts of myself and, in the process, find a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. Another example of this principle can be seen in how we handle anger. Many people, myself included, tend to suppress their anger, thinking it's a negative emotion that should be avoided. But anger, when unacknowledged, doesn't just disappear. It shows up in our lives as conflict, frustration, or even physical symptoms like tension and headaches. By rejecting anger, we inadvertently create circumstances that force us to confront it. It's only when we allow ourselves to feel and process anger that it loses its destructive power and can be channeled into something constructive. These three quotes from Jung: "What you resist persists. We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. And whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event," are more than just words. They are profound truths that challenge us to see ourselves and our lives differently. At first, they might piss you off. They might force you to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself. But if you can move past the discomfort, they have the power to set you free. In the end, Jung's wisdom is an invitation. It invites us to stop running, to stop resisting, and to start embracing the full spectrum of who we are. Because true freedom doesn't come from avoiding the uncomfortable parts of ourselves. It comes from integrating them, learning from them, and ultimately transcending them.